You were going to say
Yeah.
something?
Yeah, I was saying like now, actually now, for our viewers and for myself, because I was listening to you, watching you. It's very easy to be like holy identification because like Peter is talking some deep shit here, very important stuff, and it can easy to be fully lost in, or as a viewer, you can be fully lost in this image, yeah, in the screen, identify with the YouTube video about non-identification. And
Yes.
so as I was listening to Peter, actually it will come back to me all of this like, okay, I'm really listening to every word, I'm not checking out. At the same time, there's some kind of sense of divided attention in a way that some part of my attention is really listening and seeing, and then at the same time there's I don't know, there's aware of my body here somehow, and also was aware somehow my some there was a space, I don't know, there's space, and then there's a bit of a light, and so I'm aware of Peter, but also I'm aware of Mihai's body, and now also becoming aware of this voice, of Mihai's voice, and these inflections. So, right now, as you are listening, you can practice this divided attention. So you're not fully lost in the YouTube video. So you keep something for yourself. You're aware of your moving center / your posture right now. Aware of your emotional, sensational energies right now. You can close your eyes and we are. We are with the eyes open too.
I
So,
see you. It's interesting because I was having this same perception earlier, Mihai, that when I see you, I see an image in the screen. And if I'm identified, that's all I see. And then if I'm a little less identified, I realize I'm seeing a screen, a picture of you on a screen on the computer screen, in the computer, on the computer. And then if I'm even less identified, I'm aware of sitting in the chair, looking at the computer in which there is an image of you on the screen. And then if I'm even less identified, I'm seeing Peter sitting in the chair, looking at the computer, looking at the screen at an image of Mihai. So it's like dimensions of awareness. Now it's expanding. And what happens with identification is it becomes more contracted. When we're identified, our consciousness, our awareness goes into a more narrow tunnel and at a farther distance from the source of consciousness. And this can take many forms in all the centers. And the centers are each like that. They're each like a tunnel. And if through which our consciousness, our awareness traverses, and when we're identified, the tunnels get very narrow and we get stuck in them. On the contrary, when we're less identified, and it's a non-identification, self-remembering is magical in the sense that suddenly each of these tunnels gets wider. And now the centers become these huge conduits through which awareness can flow more freely while remaining aware of itself as the light passing through the tunnel.
Well, I maybe will finish with this one exercise that I started to do as we started to do these talks. And I was talking to you, Peter, that I was realizing that although, fourth way and all these teachings are alive in me and dedicated to it, these attempts to reviving the fragments of the fourth way, reviving the fourth way. I was saying that, oh wow, I feel like it's reviving within myself. The work is revived, reignited. So we are trying to reignite the fourth way out there for you guys, but we are reigniting it for ourselves, for me. So anyway, I get out of my car where I parked the car here in California, and then I have about 100 yards or 100 meters from my car to the house where I have yeah, so I have this 100 yards. So I started to do this exercise when I go to work in the morning, when I leave home, as well as when I come back home. Yeah, so instead of just walking with the phone, maybe listening, or I'm just walking these 100 yards unconsciously, I'm taking these 100 yards as if it's like death row. Sounds pessimistic, but no, really, like, so I'm really like this, and I'm really aware of each step. I'm trying to be aware of each step, not to be somewhere else. And somehow it get quiet inside, yeah? And aware of the body, and also aware of the light, the leaves. It's just being. I'm just being, effortlessly being. Yeah, it's kind of coming back to myself, resting in this active being till I get home. Bam. Yeah. So this twice a day, So choose a certain distance where you are focused on the work a little bit. And because these are mysterious, after some time they will activate themselves, So it's an exercise I'm trying to do. Another thing I played yesterday, yeah, this is what I did, what I mentioned. This is more about the moving center, the instinctive center. Another one with the moving center is that, let's say you choose some type of movement that usually happens automatically as it is meant to be, and mark that as a trigger for self-remembering. For instance, yesterday I did, whenever I open a door or close a door, open a door to my car or open doors, go for the seal, I'm usually you can do this, the hand does this automatically, you don't have to be there knowingly. So but I'll be consciously closing the door, consciously opening it, and using that as a like, remember and keep remembering, and engage this being like self-remembering ongoingly. I might forget, but then the next door, or going for the door seal. So this kind of stuff are very useful to make the work practical, and use it 1 day or 2 days, then change. I got a lot of benefit, Peter, from all these tics, these unconscious movements that Mihai has. I don't know what it is, from childhood, anxiety, fear, self-soothing, doesn't matter. But yeah, I'm getting much better now. Like just 2 minutes before I scratch my beard, and usually I'm doing this totally unconsciously, but now the hand went there and I was aware of it, so using tics, like, okay, not to gesticulate with the right hand for a week, not to gesticulate with the right hand for a week. Whenever I gesticulate, I'm remembering myself to put it down and to be more aware of talking, because it means that I was talking unconsciously and all of that. You see, the ashram, the cave is now in the fourth way. Talking, this ashram is us talking now, and I'm going to town. That's the ashram. That's the meditation retreat. So that's why we can't let these inconspicuous small moments be boring and unimportant. It's our life.
It makes me think about something too, Mihai, listening to you, that when we talk about identification, it can sound as though consciousness goes somewhere. It falls into identification, but in fact, it doesn't go anywhere. Consciousness and identification, or yes, consciousness, self-consciousness, conscious awareness, and identification both always happen in the moment. And they're not actually apart from one another. They are just, as Uspensky said, different sides of the same coin. And the coin is consciousness. It's either on the verge of and becoming identified, or it's on the verge of and becoming more conscious of itself. And and so it doesn't go anywhere. And it brought to mind the story of the prodigal son, which is really the story of the prodigal son, you can read it as a story about identification. And it's about consciousness wanting to experience identity in form. And it says to its father, its source, give me all of my money, which can be interpreted in different. And I'm going to go out into the world, which is the world of the mind and the body. And I'm going to experience myself and find myself there. And of course he does. And then he ends up living a life of debauchery and has a moment eventually of conscience and realizes, oh my gosh, I've wasted all of the debt I was owed. I've wasted it, all of it. I've wasted all of my conscious energy. And I'm completely now identified. And if you read the story carefully, you'll notice he doesn't actually travel back to his father's house. There's no description of him traveling back to his father's house. He simply wants to be back in his father's house. And in that moment, he had never gone anywhere. In that moment, he's back. Consciousness is back, unidentified. It's back at the point where it was not identified to begin with. And the same story is true of Dorothy.
The Wizard of Oz.
Thank you. The Wizard of Oz. When Dorothy, she's on this journey and it's all a dream. You learn in the end, it's all a dream. And in the end, she wants to go back home. She realizes finally she's discovered about the wizard. She's pulled the curtain off of the wizard and all that. And she wants to go home, and they put her in the balloon to send her home, and it doesn't work. And now she's thinking, oh my God, what do I do? And her fairy godmother says, all you have to do is tap your heels 3 times and you'll be home. And you always had this possibility. You just didn't know it. And so she taps her heels 3 times. She never goes anywhere. She's back home, and she sees it was a dream. And this is true of consciousness. And I say this because when we're identified, we may think, oh my gosh, I have to do all this stuff to no longer be identified and be conscious, be fully conscious again. And actually, it's right now. It's always right now. It's always right here. All we have to do is flip the coin, if we understand what that means. And a lot of what we've been talking about, Mihai, is discovering what that means, tasting identification in ourselves, and then beginning to taste what it feels like to not be identified, and what it is for consciousness to be fully conscious as itself, as just not even as itself. It's not a thing, as consciousness. And it's always now. Everything actually is always now. All these things we've been talking about, they're always now.
Well, I think on this note, with all these esoteric fairy tales and mythology, and with the internet becoming more and more unstable, I think we can end our discussion for today. We'll continue next week with the other obstacles. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Mihai. Thank you so much.